Hey everyone, welcome to today's stream. I know I am super late and I'm really sorry for that. Thank you, Dio Brando, for hanging in there, man, or anybody else who's watching. I had to run some quick errands this morning before I got started, and it took a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but we're here now. And we're here to kind of just have like a chill kickback sort of day, right? Like, because as you guys have noticed, I haven't uploaded any videos for the new horror classics. We're gonna go ahead and take care of that in just a moment. But lately, I've been really preoccupied with a project with the not that's all I want to call it right now is a project. Um, and it's horror like oriented. And like and it's not like a genre thing, right? It's well, I mean, it's horror, but it's not like a slasher thing. It's not a creature feature, it's not a fountain, it's nothing like that. It's just like to me a horrific idea. Like it's I don't want to talk about it right now. I don't want to talk about the specifics of it right now, right? But the thing that I'm working on, it's horror in my head, right? Like it's a horror story, but it's hard to explain why. And I want to kind of get to the bottom as to what is horror, what is the philosophy of horror, um, and like really drill into what makes something scary, what makes something qualify as a horrific story, Because I mean, we all know the monsters, the cinematography, but I want to kind of talk about the big picture philosophical elements of it, right? Because on top of that, 2 weeks ago it was my dad's birthday, and he wanted to do a birthday camping trip. And it was my nieces and nephews, their first time going camping, right? And it was only my second time, so not that I have a whole lot more experience, just two times more, literally. um, so we go on this camping trip, and as you do in camping trips, you start telling like scary stories, and you try to like spook each other, especially this time of the year. And like, and it got and it's crazy because like I was hanging out with the kids, and we had these headlights on, right? Sort of stuff you strap on your head and it keeps like a light on. And I was just sort of playing with it, and like I saw that like it would flash red if you press it enough times. So I was going walking around with the kids. They were saying, "Let's go hunting for ghosts," and I was like, "All right." And I was like, "All right, kids, as long as this light stays white, we're good. If it's red, there's ghosts around. If it starts flashing red, we need to start running." Hey, Jeremy. And so like I made it flash red, and all the kids got freaked out. Like the youngest nephew like had to go to his mom and dad. I felt kind of bad about that. Um, but what I'm trying to get at here, right, is this sort of like idea of horror has been floating around my head lately because of several different things. And it's really just kind of got me like thinking, like what is it about uh like horror, right? Because like my nieces and nephews, they range from like 4 to 8 years old, and they're young and they don't like scary stuff, but like they love like spooky stuff, if that makes any sense. And they're all like Mexican or half Mexican. And at least recently I was listening to this podcast called The Mexcellence, and it's all about like being a Mexican American. The podcast is in Texas, but some of them from California. So it's a lot of relatability stuff. A lot of stuff that I can relate to. I mean, and the last episode they did is why do Mexicans specifically, why do we love scary shit, right? And the whole podcast was just talking about like how like, yeah, when we were kids, and myself included, we were watching like Halloween when we were 3 or 4 years old. My parents didn't think twice of it. And my nieces and nephews, like, they know that I have this YouTube channel, and they know that I talk a lot about scary movies. So they always ask me, like, why do you like scary movies so much? Because they're young, they don't really fully understand it. And something that I heard them saying that I tell the kids all the time is that, like, the world itself is a scary place. Like, bad things happen to good people, for things that aren't fair, or for no reason whatsoever. The world is chaotic and it's a mess, right? At least in a horror movie, there's like a logic to it. It has to have like some sort of logic to it. Um, and it makes sense, and it's all fake anyway. So no matter how bad, anything on screen gets, in the back of your head, it's a movie, nobody's actually getting hurt. So, it doesn't seem the same way. And I could tell that the kids get it, they understand it, but they don't sort of like really like take it in. You know, they don't really like understand, maybe because they are so young, the difference between like seeing somebody be, you know, going through horrific things on screen at a movie. Yeah, that too. You know, like there's a lot of reasons why, and I'm glad that you're. And feel free, by the way, anyone to throw in your 2 cents here because I don't have the answer to this. Like, but I do like. I think there's something about horror that's. Oh, hey, happy Friday, indeed, Pink Bunny Zero. Welcome to the chat. Good to see you again, man. But like, yeah, there's something about like horror that is just like, I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been consuming so much of it lately, especially for this stream, that it's just sort of like become this sort of big thing in my head, you know. It got away from the serious of his crimes. You know, yeah, I think like it was pretty balanced like in the first movie, but as it went on, like the comedy definitely started to take too much of a presence. You know, like it started to feel like Bugs Bunny sometimes, you know. What was that one with Roseanne Barr and Tom Arnold? That one was just, I think that might have been like the last one in the 80s. Yeah, he was a child molester. Right. And I think like the remake kind of like brought that out more, if I remember correctly. But you're right. Like, but at the same time, maybe I am misremembering things, but I think even in the original, they didn't just come right out and say he was a child molester. I think they even said he was a child killer then. But I know originally that was the intent of it, you know. But yeah, like Freddy definitely. I think Freddy's a good example of like flanderization and stuff, you know. Was definitely more focused on the, yeah, okay, so maybe, so I am remembering that right. Yeah, like I think there's definitely, you know, an argument to be made, but like, okay, so let's bring it all together, right? Let's bring it all to focus here, because I think what I'm trying to get at here is like what even fucking is horror, right? Like what makes something horror? And I have a couple of things that I want to present, right? And a couple of basic rules. And I want to present the first one that I heard from Little Movie Perp. Again, great channel. I gave him the link. I don't know if he's gonna have the time to stop by, but I definitely want to get to the bottom of this, right? Like what are the rules? And I'm not talking about like in the Scream sense, right? Like I'm not talking about like, you know, don't have sex, don't do drugs kind of shit. Like, no, like I want to talk about like the philosophy of it. So and this sort of like, I think, really began when I heard Little Movie Perp, who has worked in the industry, and he directed an episode of Ash vs. the Evil Dead, actually. Idea of horror changes as we age. For instance, The Exorcist hits differently for parents who see it less about a possession and more about a helpless mother with a sick child. Dude, you cannot have said that more right, Beaver. 100%. Because I watched The Exorcist when I was like, for the first time when I was like 6. And it was pretty scary, but by that point I was pretty conditioned to a lot of like those types of movies, you know. There's that social justice aspect. Yes, definitely. We're gonna talk about that in a second. But yeah, like yeah, I remember like when I was a kid, like it freaked me out because of the, you know, the basic horror stuff, but I only saw it when I was a kid, and I watched it for the second time, I think last year. And like that movie still works. Like The Exorcist is still a great movie. But what really sort of like affected me was the scene that stuck with me the most, that really uh like fucked with me, you know, was the scene where Reagan is taken to the hospital and they're like poking and prodding at her, and like you see her go through like all these like painful procedures. She's being like cut and all this stuff, and it's so fucked up because like you said, it's about a helpless mother with a sick child, and we are put in her position because we're watching her like go through all these horrific things when in the back of our heads, like we know like it's a demonic possession. None of this shit's gonna fucking work, you know? Like, yeah, no, you're totally right. I do want to get to that because I do think there's an element of that, right? Because let's see. Well, my nieces and nephews tell me all the time is that they don't like scary stuff. Um, they like spooky stuff. And it was ever since they were kids. Like when they were kids, they loved watching this what was this Zombone on Netflix or whatever. So like they always like the aesthetics of like spooky stuff. But like now that they're, you know, kids, like a lot of the stuff they watch on YouTube is like creepy pastas type of stuff. Like a lot of it's brain rot, to be real, but it's got like creepy elements. and they're obsessed with the movie Coraline. Like for months, they've been asking me about Coraline and Coraline. And finally, my brother like rented it for them. And the other day, I was talking to them, and they told me, "Yeah, we finally watched Coraline," and they were like so stoked about it, you know. Um, and I remember being a kid, like just there was like this aura around horror, right? And there was like I don't know how to describe it, but like even then, like when I was a kid, I also understood there was a difference between like Goosebumps and like Alien, you know. So like yeah, I think there's like something that appeals to that as kids, and then like once you're actually in it, it's its own thing, you know. But let's keep going here. Horror of the eras definitely reflect the times you are made in. Media is always super reflective of that time period, 100%. And horror is a great metaphor device for our current fears, just like the hospital scene you described. Yeah, um, there was uh, talk about like you know I don't want to get too political here, but before Trump, right? There was a sort of pattern where depending on which political party had more cultural like control, you would see like a change in horror genres that get made. Specifically, when America felt was culturally dominated by Democrats or anybody that was sort of like to the left and progressives, you saw a lot of horror movies about vampires because vampires were like sophisticated and seductive, and all these sort of like they presented themselves as this sort of like mysterious thing, but deep down it was like this corrupt and hollow thing. And that's how a lot of conservatives view the left and progressives and Democrats and all that. And whenever you saw this in George Bush, because that's when we saw the explosion of like zombie films, Land of the Dead and all that shit. Speaking of Romero, but like yeah, during the Bush administration, the thing shifted towards zombies because zombies are these mindless hordes of disgusting, disease-ridden like monsters. And that's like not literally, of course. I don't think like the right literally views us as vampires, but to some extent, like that plays into how the left views the right. The 70s were the slasher paradigm. I don't think the 90s were. I think the 70s were like I think the 70s were a weird time because like they weren't like a thing, right? Like slashers weren't like a thing, but like they were starting you were starting to get those proto slashers and stuff. And like I'm thinking like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like we did get a slash like and it's weird because Halloween is to horror what Jaws is to like action like filmmaking, like action adventure movies, where all of a sudden, like much like Jaws was just another action movie or adventure movie, whatever you want to call it, that sort of showed the formula to proven blockbuster success. Halloween said these types of movies can be made super cheaply and appeal to a wide audience, and everybody's going to want to see them. And yeah, no, totally, Craig. I agree. The 80s were the era of slashers. But like the 70s were, I think, in my opinion, probably the best time for films and especially for the horror genre because like there was so many like different how do I say it? It felt like horror movies on all levels, all the way from like the B movies to the independent movies, all the way up to like big studio movies. Anybody who was working in the horror genre was just doing groundbreaking stuff. A lot of it was because as Pink Bunny Zero said, it was a way for people to explore sort of a lot of their social anxieties through films and stuff. But I think the 70s were just sort of like a time where a lot of horror elements were sort of like being toyed around with in very interesting ways. And yeah, I agree. I think that was maybe like excuse me. That was definitely when you started to see horror become elevated for the first time to a more not only mainstream thing but a more respectable thing, Um but yeah, 100%. There was I mean, yeah, I mean, I guess you're right, but to be honest, like but I know they were there, but I haven't actually don't remember watching a lot of like fantasy horror in the like growing up. What I remember watching growing up from the 80s were slashers. Let's see. The 70s was its inspirational peak. Were very Cambrian. Cambrian, like is that? I don't know that name to be honest. So, Oh, okay. You know, I actually haven't seen Reanimator, but I get okay, but I get what you're saying. I think like fantasy horror, or I think like the '80s. One of the reasons why horror was like doing so well was because there were so many advances in practical effects and practical makeup and animatronics and stuff. And I think horror movies were just yeah, I think horror movies were just a great way, a great like vehicle to make to advance like you know, animatronic technology and makeup effects and stuff like that. And I think maybe that's another aspect of the horror genre that goes uncelebrated too, right? Is that like you need to be able to do makeup and effects in horror. And I think especially, you know, with like Tom Savini, um, who kind of came at it from like a very like B movie independent world, like I think he probably found a lot of really cool ways to get those sort of convincing horror effects and makeup on like really small budgets, especially the stuff that he did with like you know, Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, and I mean there's a lot of really great things about horror, right? Like I mean, horror is such a rich genre because it sort of requires its own like I wouldn't say like language, but its own like completely unique mindset to sort of like get into, right? Like it's very rare that people just by chance like just start watching a horror movie like halfway through. People usually sit down and choose to watch a horror movie, whereas most people will just like put on a comedy, put on a drama even without really putting much thought into it. I mean, unless it's something like super hairy, like heavy thematically, but other than that, right? But okay, I want to get back to what little movie perp said. Because I thought like it was a very insightful I thought it was a very insightful comment. He said that like in horror, you can never defeat the villain, or yeah, you can never destroy the horror, right? You can never destroy the source of the evil. You can temporarily defeat it, you can temporarily stop it, but you can't like permanently kill it. And he said something very interesting. He said part of what makes horror something horrific is the idea of helplessness, the idea that you can never really truly be done with this thing. Uh okay, hey, there he is, little movie perp. Yeah, no, like I'm quoting you here, man. So like yeah, when you said that in horror you can never truly like destroy the source of the evil, you could only like temporarily stop it because for something to be horrific, it has to be like this big sort of thing that's always been like that maybe not like always been around, but like has to be this more abstract idea. And I think that's yeah, I think that's a very solid like entry point to sort of have this conversation, right? Because I think what he's getting at when he says that is that what makes something horror beyond just like the aesthetics, beyond just any like genre elements or tropes, or even iconography, is the essential like feeling that we create in the audience, you know, that is done through like this genre, and that is specifically the feeling of like fear, of like being afraid, you know. And I think that's something that I think is what the you know, you eventually kind of come to grow up, right? Is that like nobody wants to be scared in the real world because the real world is chaotic and unpredictable. But there is something fun about being scared. It does, you know, get your adrenaline pumping, and all these sort of things that are undeniably like thrilling and can be positive. Also, you know, because well, we'll get more into it. Um, and as long and yeah, but like just because it is something, and because it is something that we know like in the back of our heads is fake, it needs to like bring something out of us, something like deep in our core to really like feel real. And I think yeah, that is one really great way to sort of lens it, you know, because yeah, if something is unstoppable, right? And I'll get, you know, and I'll talk about this movie more in a second, but um I was watching well, I'll just go on the show right now from the Vinegar Syndrome Mexican Gothic, the films of Carlos Enrique Taboada set right here. I was watching Blacker Than the Night, Más Negra que la Noche, and in that movie, basically, and it's like, you know, a Mexican riff on a giallo movie, and like it's a pretty decent movie. It's pretty fun. It's a very well, you know, kind of reminded me of Abigail, right? It's like a very strongly made average script, you know? And you know what I liked about it was that like the strongest thing about it to me, the thing that really stuck with me is that like the whole movie is about this cat that you know, I won't get into it, but let's just say this cat, and it sounds ridiculous, but trust me, like it works in this movie. The ghost of this cat is like haunting this group of women. And I'm being super reductive here. Trust me, it works a lot better than I'm describing it. But the whole movie plays out, and it's a pretty decent movie. But like at the end, it just ends with like the sound of the cat meowing and the character looking like at the camera. It's just like the most simple thing, like in this otherwise sort of like standard horror movie that stuck with me because that's exactly what oh dude, yeah, it's definitely a really fun movie. Más Negra que la Noche, I think it's on Tubi as well. But yeah, let's see. At the end of the day, horror can be seen as commentary of death. No one can escape that. We cannot win over death. So representing that in horror and defeating death doesn't feel honest. Yeah, no, perfect. And dude, seriously, like if you ever want to schedule it out, let's do it. I'm happy to have this conversation more in depth. But like what are you gonna say? Yeah, so um it is in a lot of ways a meditation on not just a commentary on death, but a lot of other things. But I'll definitely, you know, we'll get into that later. Um, but yeah, like I think because little things like that, right? Those little things sort of like touch onto that feeling that there is this something bigger, scarier thing that is incomprehensible and that is inescapable. Yeah, I definitely think that that is not just like a huge part of it. I think that it might just be the whole game, you know, like at its core, right? I think there's more to it than that, but like in terms of like the very core of it, I think it's really just comes down to like that appeal to our core like fears and stuff. And so yeah, I think something else here that Pink Bunny Zero said is that yeah. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying by Cambrian. A time of experimentation and explosive growth. Yeah, I like that. That's funny. That's cool. I never heard it used that way before, but I like it. Horror has always been a good entry to film. It doesn't rely on money or expensive performers while having a built-in audience. Yeah, and also like I think like even like the mediocre like horror movie, if it works, it works because a director of that genre needs to like have some sort of understanding of it to like elicit a feeling. So yeah, that's a very good point. Um, a rich genre, one of the few that's evergreen. It's been kicking around since the beginning of cinema, definitely. And I mean, I think even like the beginning of time. You know, I think a lot of mythology just sort of comes from like just sort of sitting around the campfire, talking about you know spooky shit, trying to make sense of the world. You know what? Maybe that's what it is. It's just spooky shit trying to make sense of the world. You know, like tale as old as time. Final Destination films. Yeah, definitely. I think the strongest, and I think there's a lot of creativity to it. You know, I think part of the reasons why horror is such an evergreen genre is just because like there are so many ways to do it. And I think another thing that makes horror work is that like the best horror feels like just as personal as like the best dramas out there. It still feels like not only are we exploring these broad ideas, but we're exploring it from a very like specific point of view. And because of that, it can be like so many different things, right? And what I love about the Final Destination movie specifically is that they are horror movie. They're essentially slasher movies, right? But the slasher movie is invisible. So to visualize the slasher, it's basically Rube Goldberg machinery. Like the slasher is physics and like the manipulation of like these little things, you know. But that's the fucking fun of it, man. Like that is the best thing about the horror genre. And with the short film we're gonna close out on today, it's called Ghost Goose, you know, because I think yeah, one of the best things about horror is just like the sheer creativity of it, and that you can make horror out of fucking anything, including the goddamn ghost cat. Yeah. Um, Horror is pure cinema. What makes movies interesting and fun? Plot, conflict. A girl running from a dude with a chainsaw is pure conflict, the simplest form. Which is why it surprises me that you didn't like Strange Darling, bro. Like that's like the entire first chapter is just that. Let's see. Yeah, I love the Final Destination movies too, man. Ghost Goose is it's part of the Ghost Animal cinematic universe, bro. Fucking okay. That joke, the timing's gone for that window. The timing window has moved past that joke, and so we must move past this point. God, let's see. So definitely to speak to some great, and you can't defeat it. Yeah. Okay. No, yeah, that's the stuff, man. No, I mean, you got to admit, like that first chapter of that movie is something else. And yeah, like because getting back to the idea that horror has to feel personal, right? And I'll guess I'll do my new horror classics review of Midsommar right now. In fact, I actually have it right here. Um, I'm gonna show off a bunch of my favorite like box sets and possessions here, and this is definitely one of them. This is the A24. Oh shit! Oh no, it's the yellow is not. Let me see. What if I put it over here? Okay, over here. Yeah, like you can kind of see it. You can kind of see it. I think. Fuck. This is not playing well. Okay, it's yellow, guys. All the dude, the yellow works so much better. Okay, I'm just gonna put this away now. But it's the A24 director's cut blue 4K of let me see. The Ghost Cinematic Universe. That's great. Okay, this will show up better. Yeah, this is the instant. No, it's okay. There you go. Yeah, this is the inner jacket here. Um, and it's just like a really cool. Like I'll show you guys what A24 box sets look now, but like I really love these ridiculously oversized thing. You know, it has like a lot of these like boutique labels have like books and stuff like that, and this is literally just like laid out. The whole thing is just a book. I can't show some of the stuff that's in here. Um, let's see. Let's see what I can show. Got an essay here from Ragnar from fucking Martin Scorsese. Check out some of this artwork here. We got some stuff from throughout the movie too. It's a pretty great set. The fucking cover is great. I really wish that I could show it to you guys better. But and I'm not hating because like I like this too, but this is what the current A24 boxes look like. I got a Love Lies Bleeding and I saw the TV glow. They look cool. You know, they come with like lithographs and stuff, which is pretty legit, but it's just it's not as fucking cool, man. It's just not as impressive as the big stupid dong size fucking things, you know. Let's see. Yes, horror is intimate, very difficult to do epic horror. Those fall flat. I think the closest we got to a summer blockbuster horror is the It remakes. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. They felt big, but still pretty good. Um, yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. I mean, A24 physical media presentation is incredible. I got Green Knight. Thanks for recommending it. Oh, dude, yeah, no, I should probably get that set too because Green Knight's one of my favorite movies of the decade so far. So what was I gonna say? Yeah, so Midsommar. I saw the theatrical cut opening weekend. And I think looking back, I went to go see it like with a couple of friends. We were all hungover after a big fucking party that we had. And I think out of all of us, I was definitely the worst, the most hungover back then. But we went to go see it, and I didn't like it. I didn't like it the first time because it felt to me like a 2.5 hour long breakup movie, and and it just felt so a little, a little bit. It felt weirdly not that. Let me see what I was gonna say. It felt a little bit like too intimate, right? Because another thing that's sort of like up for debate um is how long should a horror movie be? Because I think I think for the most part, horror shouldn't be a standard horror movie. shouldn't be longer than like an hour 40 on at the very most. Like, and I'm talking like your basic, like not trying to do anything too ambitious or crazy sort of horror movie. Shouldn't be more than 100 minutes long. If you the longer the horror movie goes on beyond that, in my opinion, the bigger the themes, the bigger the ideas. Yeah, exactly. The longer it goes on, the better the ideas have to be, the better the exploration, the more in depth that it has to be. So the problem with the theatrical cut is that because of what they chose to cut out, and because it is weirdly shorter, it puts too much of the movie's focus on this breakup. And let me see. I will tell you right now, no Puerto Rican would have been anywhere near Midsommar. No, yeah, that's totally something that that's like one of those, like one of the tropes in horror movies is that white people just doing shit that nobody else would fucking do, I guess, you know, at all, unfortunately. Thank you. I'm not the one who thinks Terrifier. I think, I haven't seen Terrifier 2 myself, but I am planning to. But anyways, back to Midsommar. With the theatrical cut, I thought that for 2.5 hours, it felt too much of like about something that was too small. It felt like it was this way too elaborate, way too dramatic, way too over the top breakup movie, right? And I didn't watch it again until I bought the A24 disc a few months ago for the Bo is Afraid essay, which I swear is still getting made. It's just taking a long time because it's a long ass fucking movie. But but I rewatched it. I rewatched it when I first got it, and I liked it better. I liked it more. Um, but and to be totally real here, I watched it when I was still with my ex. I rewatched it last weekend, and it's been about what 7 months. Yeah, I've been single now for 7 months, and here's the funny part. Here's the fucking funny part. Like the part of the movie that was just a breakup movie, like really fucking affected me, dude. Like it really hit me. By the end, watching it, yeah, I hate to say it, dude. Yeah, yeah, but it wasn't just because of the breakup. Okay, I'll touch on that in a second, right? It wasn't just because it was I just I just went through a breakup myself. It wasn't just that. But man, like, and it's I don't want to get too into details about like the actual breakup itself, but like it was too easy for me to put myself into Christian's like shoes when it came to his relationship with Danny, like towards the end. And not, I wasn't, don't get me wrong, I was never as bad as him. Like, I think so. I think there's been this gender divide since the beginning of Midsommar between like a lot of women thinking that Christian totally deserves what he got, and a lot of guys like disagreeing. And like the older I get, the more sympathy I have for that fucking guy because I think sadly almost every guy has been a Christian Hughes from Midsommar. Unfortunately, I definitely am guilty of that myself. I have been I have been a fucking guy in my early 20s, unfortunately. But that's all Christian is. He's just your standard guy in his early 20s who isn't very like good at, voicing his emotions or expressing his emotions in a healthy manner or communicating. And like when I watch it, I'm like, give this man, let him cook. Give this guy a couple of years, let him get his heart broken a few times, and then he'll understand, And so like, yeah, I totally felt so bad for Christian at the end of it because like he doesn't deserve that. But I think that is going towards another sort of facet of horror that I think is really important. And it's something that I talked about in my Shin Godzilla review is that horror by necessity needs to be cruel. It needs to be like horrific. I'm clearing my throat a lot. I should probably go get some water real quick. All right, yeah, I'm back. And yeah, let's get right back to what I was talking about. Yeah, there has to be some sort of injustice or unfairness or randomness. Yeah, absolutely. I think like part of something being like unknowable or unkillable. I think something that is just like incomprehensible is is another facet of it. Because God, what am I trying to get at here? Like kind of getting back to The Exorcist, right? Like part of what the appeal when we go watch a horror movie, the sort of like unspoken sort of like the what's the word I'm looking for here? I guess the unspoken appeal of horror, the sort of like lizard brain reason why we go and watch a horror movie is a little bit to see how far this horror movie is going to take it. How cruel is it going to get, right? And I don't think there's anything like, and don't get me wrong, I think it is inherently salacious and all that for sure. But I think there's something um a little bit more going on than just his surface level, like, let's just go stare at the car crash quality of it. I think like horror is a safe place for humanity to put all its darkness at, right? Um Back in the day, people would just sit around. I mean, people you just used to go watch like executions, right? People would watch live vivisections. It was that fucking doctor who would just surgically put two dogs' heads onto one. All this horrific shit that happened to real living things and humans who experienced like a real pain. So like there's always been this part of the human like psyche that has wanted to like witness these awful things, right? Like I think all of us unfortunately traumatized ourselves by like going on rotten.com when we were like in fifth grade or something. But yeah, I think like there is something about like that lizard brain quality of horror that sort of appeals to it too. It's not just a place for us to feel afraid in a safe place. It's also like a place for us to put like all our dark shit at. That's why there's so many monsters that are just sort of extracted metaphors for some part of the human condition. You know, like what is a werewolf if not like just the fear of our dark psyche personified? What is a vampire if not the fear of what I was getting at earlier, like being taken advantage of by something that presents itself as more appealing and attractive and stuff. Like horror is from its beginning. It's just sort of like in a weird way, it's a part of everybody, right? It's a part of like everyone. Like horror in a weird way frames the human psyche, mainly because our psyche comes from our fucking ancestors who had to be afraid of the dark, who had to fucking consider that something could come out and fucking kill you at any fucking second. Like yeah, like a lot of it is just kind of born from that real primal fucking like part of ourselves that's still there. Experiencing the darkest recesses of the human experience and beyond, safest way possible. We want to be disturbed and challenged in the safest of yeah, no, that's exactly it. I'm not Pink Bunny Zero, but if yeah, I would love to hear I'd love to see if you could expound on it for sure. The central outlet for sure. Jekyll and Hyde is also like that, the fear of our innermost dark side manifesting. Yeah. Yeah. And we see it like in a lot of ways. Yeah, examine our place and then also like examine our base selves. Losing all your agency and loved ones suffer for it. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. And I think a lot of it too. I think even mummies, right? I think mummies as a monster is very fucking interesting, and when you sort of put it into the context of like where it came from, because mummies are only monsters in the modern Western world. You know, mummies were literally not like a thing. People were mummified. They didn't become mummies. Their dead bodies were mummified and preserved as part of like these different cultures is like death rituals, you know? So like like what's even interesting is if you sort of take the social aspect of it into consideration. Because what happens, right? The Western world colonizes the rest of the world, right? Exploits it and pillages it, And at some point, during around the same time that like film as a medium was starting to like um, you know, have a more mainstream presence, we started to get inside the pyramids, and there's this big sort of supposed curse and all that. In a lot of ways, you could even argue that mummies are a fear of like of the past, right? Of the ancient spirits coming back from the dead to sort of like wreak havoc for disturbing their peace, right? Disturbing their natural state. It's all there. Monsters and patron states of insecurities and darkest fears. Oh, there you fucking go. I love that. To say things that are otherwise unsaid. Memetics is basically what we are talking about. Cultures using screens as a mirror. That's yeah, I love that. That's exactly what we're talking about here for sure. People used to eat mummies and use them for paints. Oh, dang! I didn't know that. So yeah, they weren't monsters though, right? Like they weren't like these horrific things. They didn't even minimize at some point. Mummy's connection to death that scares the West, right? Because of sort of our very limited. You're right. It's very true. I wish I liked Del Toro just a little bit more. You know what's weird? I think we all have our directors like that. I think I have a lot of directors that I wish I liked their work more than I did. But what's weird about Del Toro for me, dude, is that like he's such a constant presence in like the studio news cycle through all his production work and all that. That in a weird way, in my head, right? He's like the Robert Zemeckis of horror. And it's not that I don't like Robert Zemeckis. It's just that I'm not always super excited to go watch a Robert Zemeckis movie. But unlike Robert Zemeckis, nine times out of 10, when I go see a Del Toro movie, it's fantastic stuff. Um, I wish dude, I think Blade 2 is relatively well regarded, to be honest. I mean, I think it's the most well liked of the trilogy, from what I understand. I wish Hellboy, like I never watched the Golden Army, but his Hellboy movie was legit, like really damn good. I think it's really underrated. Um, but yeah, sort of getting back to um, you know, monsters and very creative. The execution just lacks a bit, but I dig the Zemeckis comparison. Well, yeah, no, yeah. I mean, again, it's all about the presence. I think they have more than anything, but let's look at the again Frankenstein's monster, right? Frankenstein's monster is essentially a manifestation of our fear of God, you know, and I think that it's interesting because like just like God, what was I getting at earlier? Just like mummies came at a time where like technology was advancing, or film technology was becoming mainstream. Frankenstein came at a time where like electricity, we were making all these advancements in like electricity and advancing the civilized world. And yeah, it probably did feel, it probably did feel for a lot of people like we were playing God. And yeah, um, sort of getting back to the cruelty aspect of it, right? I think it was who was it here? I want to make sure that I'm quoting the right person. Um, there has to be an element of injustice. Let me see. Yeah, but yeah, no, there does have to be like an element of injustice, like some sort of like, because I think that's what sticks with you, right? Because I mean, let's face it. I was talking about Midsommar, and that was the first thing I talked about was Christian, because it did leave me feeling like, man, he didn't deserve that. And I think maybe that's even like slashers, part of the horror, because like slashers are generally seen as more goofy these days than genuinely like horror, like generally scary, right? But the horror elements just kind of come from these basic aspects. Like one, you can never really kill Chuck, you can never really kill Chucky or Jason or Michael or Freddy, right? They're unkillable. We don't know why they keep coming back. It's unknowable, right? And I think the cruelty, especially when it comes to like you know, Jason and Michael specifically, is that they're killing teenagers. Like, yeah, they're shitty, and yeah, they probably shouldn't be drinking and doing all this crazy stuff, but none of them deserve to die for it, and that is the sort of injustice at the core, excuse me, by the way, of those movies, is that like it's inherently unfair that these kids, for indulging in their natural impulses, are dying, but also take into context the political, social, political aspect of the time, and a lot of it more kind of fleshes out and makes more sense. Um, a fear of the future when we all die and be desecrated. Yeah, no, that's a pretty good way of looking at it. Let me see. I've never considered Blade 2 as underrated, probably because I live in my own bubble where it's always ruled. But it's one of the best examples of pacing in superhero cinema ever. Just like a great, you know, I think like that's the first example of seeing what a genuine auteur can do with genre and stuff like that. Let me see. I think Mummy's also. I just read that one. Horror for me reflect. Yeah, yeah, dude, 100%. It's just so expertly constructed. A stream of set pieces. Oh, okay, yeah. Talk about Blade 2. Myers, the greatest single unstoppable force of all time, and like also, even just like the basic irrationality that like Michael and Jason just walk everywhere and somehow always manage to outrun these like young people who are running for their lives. Thank God I don't have to morally agree with the movie too. Oh yeah, no, God no, dude. I mean, yeah, like I don't think you can like enjoy even like the work of Haneke or Von Trier if that was the case. Or at least you should be able to enjoy a movie that you don't morally agree with. That's the way I see it. Those teenage horror movies are always moral allegories. So yeah, yeah. Um I think they're sort of versions of like folk tales, right? Like the sort of talking about the what, not the boogeyman, well, I guess maybe the boogeyman, but these sort of, what's the word, folkloric horrors, right? To keep people from doing things. It's sort of like an abstraction of that. I'm using the worst language here, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Like I'm Mexican. Any Mexicans in the chat know about La Llorona, right? It's just a scary scary story we tell kids so they can go wandering around at night. I think we all have some sort of cultural version of that, or Kukui, our boogeyman. Um, Let me see. What was that? What was it saying? Oh yeah. So back to Midsummer, right? So yeah, like, and what I really loved about Midsummer this time around, uh, was that it's 2 hours and 50 minutes long. It's almost 3 hours long, and don't and it's a sort of like your standard director's cut, where like if you sort of just view it as a version of the movie compared to the theatrical, all the stuff that was taken out makes sense. It does slow the movie down, but I think the director's cut works on a totally different level, right? Because all the stuff that they cut out is almost all just world building more about the cult. But what I loved about that was that because it shaved away all those things for the theatrical, all I saw in the theatrical was the breakup story. But in the director's cut, with all that stuff taken back in, the the horga, the cult aspect of it became the real sort of heart of the movie. And a big aspect of the film is Danny's like subtle brainwashing. Well, the brainwashing of all the characters, but specifically Danny. And in this director's cut, it tracks so much more because of the added scenes that Danny knew she was in danger at first and then eventually lost that fear. That becomes a much bigger part of the story. Um, and what happened for me watching it with the with my like emotional state post breakup all these months later, where I'm starting to get real reflective about stuff, um and sort of experiencing this movie as a film more about the cult and more about the indoctrination of that cult, or into that cult, from that cult indoctrinating someone from the outside. My words all over the place today here, guys, I'm sorry. But like, yeah, I felt it really put me in the shoes of Danny, and it really was a much more powerful experience. Like, it really fucking like affected me this time, because in the end, I felt like really moved by like the final images, which let's face it, everybody's seen the final shot of this movie so much. It's in like video essays on social media, on all these things. It's like one of the most iconic like images in modern horror cinema. So like I've seen it hundreds of times, but like this time, the whole 2 hour and 50 minute experience is so much more holistic and so much like grand, not just in its scope, but in its like exploration of it, that like it really did have the fully intended effect of just like gut punching me and really just like putting me right there in Danny's shoes, because by the end of this cut of the movie, much like Danny, I really felt like I understood and sympathized with the Horga. Like I really felt like I don't agree with you, but I get it. And I felt weird judging them, even though I was watching them do horrible things. And I realized, holy shit, I just got fucking Dannied, you know? And then one last thing that I'll say about, and this has always been the case for me, even from the beginning, from the first viewing. What I like the most about it is Florence Pugh's performance. God, like she is just heartbreaking to watch, man. She is just fucking heartbreaking to watch, because like she is holding so much in. She is in so much pain and she's fighting so hard not to show it. And it just like, oh dude, that just fucking like killed that shit killed me, dude. Because like towards the end of a breakup, like there's just like or it because of the breakup itself, watching Florence Pugh kind of mirror visually like what that experience was like. Oh man, like yeah, again, like part of it is just because I myself am now like single after a breakup, rewatching it, but also it just the 2 hour and 50 minute runtime. This is something I'll explore later. Sometimes a long runtime is the point, is like part of the experience in and of itself. And I think Midsommar should have never been cut to a theatrical like version, because this feels like Midsommar, and the theatrical cut feels like I wouldn't even say I don't want to go so far as to say bastardized, but I don't think I'll ever watch the theatrical cut again. I could see myself watching Midsommar maybe even this weekend one more time, because it really did move me last week when I saw it. Let's see. Even Drag Me to Hell was a doozy when it comes to cruelty, and yet still fun as fuck. That kind of contraction leads to interest naturally, and the violent nature whittles down the slasher to its most. You know what? That was terrifier for me, to be fair. But I've heard that about In a Violent Nature. I need to watch it for sure. Drag Me to Hell is also a great example of horror in its odd way, being the most morally sound of the genres. All the cruelty is predicated on Justine doing something out of selfishness. Yeah, yeah. The Wicker. I love that. They call the theatrical cut the Wicker breakup. That's yeah. No, it's for real. It to me, the theatrical cut feels so small, so like minor compared to this. Excuse me. So, Um, I liked In a Violent Nature. I need to watch it, man. I really need to watch it. There's a lot of. I mean, it's fucking. I need to watch Oddity too. And what's that other one? Oh god, there's an other fucking. I mean, it's Shutter, dude. There's always some good shit to watch on Shutter. What was I saying? Yeah, let's keep talking about horror movies. um, yeah, because last night, you know what? Yeah, one of the other discs that I wanted to show off, because I got this recently, and this is why I wanted to show it. This is one of the coolest box sets that I think that I have in my whole collection here now. Let me get this mic set up, and it's the hey, that one actually shows up. The J Horror Rising box set from Arrow. I gotta show you guys like just this poster here is fucking badass. Look at that shit. Look at my shit, dude. Look at my fucking shit. It's double sided, but I like the first side that I saw that I showed most. Um, so let's see, there you go. Pop it back in. That's this really dope fucking book set. These covers are really nice. They're all nice and stylish and shit. Like this is the one that I watched yesterday. There you go. Fucking Noroi, The Curse on Blu-ray for the first time, I believe. Let me get this put away here for a second. All right. Okay. But yeah, the J horror box set, it has 5 movies. Let me tell you guys what it has. It's got Shikoku and Isola, multi-personality girl. That I I really want to see that one. Inugami, St. John's Wort, Carved, The Slit-Mouthed Woman, Persona, and Noroi the Curse. Now, I think a lot of people what was I say? Yeah, I think a lot of people like me bought this specifically to watch Noroi. So I watched it when it was on Shutter, like 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And it was fucking wild. I rewatched it again yesterday, last night, and dude, like this is found footage like perfected in my opinion. It's like a great use of the found footage like tropes, but it also like mixes in all these television clips and stuff, and just really sells you on this really kind of dark and twisted ghost story with some really fantastic like acting. Let me see. I know you mentioned getting Martin before. What did you think? I actually haven't like pulled the trigger on that one yet. That's been on my to buy list for a while. But I did get the Indicator Bruiser 4K when that was released. Raimi's best horror movie, and it comes from someone who's been obsessed. You know what? I think it's up there, man. I think it's up there for sure. I had to buy Martin for sure though. I want to see that one really bad. The other night, the final mid credit scene. Okay, are you talking about like? Are you talking about like when they get the tape that showed what happened that night? Is that because that was pretty great? Like, so for those who don't know, Noroi is a sort of fake documentary. It kind of reminded me of Lake Mungo in a lot of ways, but this is like way more of a genre movie. And it's like basically following this paranormal investigator, who like it starts off as this really basic case, but then eventually balloons into this much more like grand folkloric mystery. Um, it's it's what, how do I say it? I think found footage specifically a like movies are all about the ride, are all about the experience of going through this journey more than like other movies, because like the found footage format, the documentary format just grounds it so much more. And because of that, I think it has to be more like chronological, if that makes any more sense. I mean, don't get me wrong, like all movies start small and then kind of grow from there. But I think like with found footage, that's what the journey is, you know? And I think with Noroi, the compounding, like the way that the different facets of the story like compound and intermix with each other, it sort of just weaves this really like dark story, and it's just like really like borderline demented, you know. And by the end of it, it just makes you feel like you how do I say it? I think like horror, on top of the cruelty of it, like it should just kind of feel like inherently kind of like gross. Not, if not like viscerally, but like in the end, like you should walk away being like that was a very unpleasant experience. And I think Noroi is a very punishingly bleak, yeah, little fake documentary movie, man. There's one thing that it has more over Lake Mungo, is that as much as I like Lake Mungo, it ends on a little bit too happy of a note towards the third act before it sort of reels itself back in, you know. Um, Leroy is totally out of, is one I'm totally out of sync with. Didn't work for me, but I'm willing to rewatch. Also didn't work for me on viewing. Now, I need to watch the original Ring U. I know Arrows put out that one and Jew owned, but I haven't seen either of the original ones of those. But I did love The Ring. Like I think The Ring is probably the best PG-13 horror movie, at least that I can think of. Uh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Seeing it all. I like it. I also would have liked like they didn't show it. Don't get me wrong. Like I think it's great, a great scene, but I think for me it would have been just as like effective if we never saw what actually happened. But maybe it would have been too sequel baity. Director Neroy's and Martin Scorsese of found footage. He did a record of Street Murder, amazing, and The Cult, my personal favorite. Oh yeah, you talked about it. You talked about a Cult, and they're all good to him. I got to check out his other stuff, man. Like yeah, found footage to me, like when found footage is done right, it can be some of the best horror out there. Unfortunately, it's very hard to do it right. I've been wanting to watch Martin for probably 13 to 14 years and was worried it wouldn't live up. When I finally got the second sight 4K, it was worth the wait. Romero is unmatched in my opinion. Yeah, no, I need to what was the last Romero that I watched? I think I watched The Crazies like last year. I need to set some more time apart for George Romero's other movies. Um I think I think you know what? Let me check something else here because there was something else that I wanted to do. What was it? Oh, okay. Yeah, you know what? We'll leave the discussion of what makes horror for now. I was going to show. You know what? I might as well show these other two here. But we can come back to it. If you guys have anything more to add in the chat, we can come right back to it anytime and discuss it further. But I think those are the big ones that at least are relevant to what I'm working on outside of pop counterculture. Let me see here. Favorite movie of all time. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I need to watch Season of the Witch. I have the Arrow Blu-ray on that one. This is another one that I just kind of love the presentation of it. This is Radiance's End of Civilization, the films of Piotr Zolkin movies. I've only seen War of the Worlds, The Next Century, which is just really it kind of it has the aesthetics of the first act of A Clockwork Orange, which is I think A Clockwork Orange has one of the greatest first acts in any horror in any movie ever, you know. And I think like War of the Worlds definitely has that vibe throughout the entire movie. And it's also just like a really great example of like doing good sci-fi satire like on a budget. And yeah, like I want to watch the rest of that set, but I October popped up, so I had to watch some more horror movies. One of those I've heard of them though. No, I've only seen one, but like the one that I saw was legit. And then this is the latest one that I wanted to see because I don't think this is rare or nothing, but like I doubt a lot of people have this. And this is Francis Ford Coppola's his own pressing, his own release through American Zoetrope of One for the Heart on DVD. Actually, I tend to not buy DVDs if there's other options available, but this is directly from Zoetrope. It's a 2 disc set. Let me see. It's got like a it's got an actual letter here. It's got an actual letter here from I actually haven't opened this. Yeah, see, he put out like a fucking full on Criterion style release here. Um, wait a second. Oh, for a second there, I thought there was a big error on my shit here, but no, we're good. Um, and the one I think like the reason why I pulled the trigger is just because like looking at just two of these images, I see La La Land and Blade Runner 2049. You see that? Yeah, the ones that you can actually see. I can already see the influence of them in other movies. But yeah, let me go ahead and just read what Francis Ford Coppola says here. I'd have to say that in many ways, One from the Heart was the antidote to Apocalypse Now. That film has been so tough, so thoroughly frightening, so strange in its exploration of morality that I wanted very badly to make a film that was its opposite, something more like a fable, which Megalopolis is a fable, and that's I hear very comparable to this movie. Um, what was I saying? Fable. More like the musical comedies I used to direct in college. I didn't know he directed musical comedies. Also, I had come to the conclusion that in the last days of Apocalypse Now, that the cinema was about to go through an extraordinary change and that it was able to become electronic. I was sure that movies were going to be shot and edited digitally. They were eventually, and we're going to be able to make use of the many facilities of an electronic medium. It was my thought that perhaps there could be such a thing as live cinema, which he tried to do uh, in Megalopolis. Some new as of yet undemonstrated form that used the methods and principles of the great live TV performed in the 50s by such great directors as John Frankenheimer. Anyone who's seen his work in the period, such as a comedian or Turn of the Screw, can understand how tempting it would be to mount the entire full length piece of cinema basically in real time. I became very enthusiastic about creating a studio of the future, which would facilitate working in this way by combining elements of stagecraft, music, and dance, and yet be able to use cinematic elements of montage and mise en scene, much in the way that Frankenheimer successfully did years before. So we began to prepare the way to actually do such an experiment, one in which the sound design and musical elements would be added during what was essentially a live performance of the pieces. The sets would all be built on stages and lined up in proximity according to the sequence of scenes in the script. This was the first film to assemble modern electronic equipment to be used in this way, and the film brought back Jerry Lewis's original idea to mount TV cameras on film cameras, now known as video assist, to allow scenes to be switched, edited during a live performance. Of course, the final method of making the film was forced to back up a little. A great cinematographer didn't really want to use as many cameras at once as would be necessary, and the sets began to be too extensive to allow the actors to run from one end to the next without a break. And of course, a roll of film in those days would run for only 10 minutes, so a total live cinema experience was somewhat impossible. Still, we made one from the heart, as close to that idea as humanly possible. And although the result may be a bit wacky, there is, I hope, a charm of its own. This is from Francis Ford Coppola in 2003. Um, I'm really fucking curious about this movie, man. Like, it's one of those oddities, late stage fucking Coppola, which I think is just like it's weird. Like I think flop era Coppola is more interesting, even though his movies are worse. You know, um, cut a single one of those. I've heard of them though. With the exception of Monkey Shines, I love every movie he did. I think Monkey Shines is well, I mean, I mean that movie, One from the Heart, is just such a Coppola in general, but like One from the Heart is seen as like the beginning of the end of his imperial period. I tend to disagree because I think he had a solid run in the 80s. Rumblefish, The Outsiders. You know, those are the ones that I've seen, but I heard some more of his 80s movies are good too.